backcountry. Okay, everybody, welcome. Today we have a great guest. It is Peter van Stralen. You might know Peter from the YouTube channel Epic Family Road Trip. Peter is the kind of guy who lives the sort of life that most can only dream of. He's literally been traveling on the road or living at an off-grid camp in Northern Ontario since 2016, and he just has a lot of amazing stuff to share. So, Peter, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're
Glad to be here.
You're very welcome, yeah. And just before the show, you started telling me you're on this overlanding, essentially off-roading adventure.
Yeah.
And you look at your GPS and you need gas, and you're only... your GPS says you're only 90 minutes from the small community in the mountains in BC.
Right.
And then things got a little interesting. What exactly happened there?
Yeah, so we travel with, at the time we were traveling with 2 decked out Jeeps. So everything we own is in there. You can camp in their rooftop tents, the works, right? They're 4-wheel drive. They do have auxiliary fuel tanks. So we're geared to be in the backcountry. So we think, we're just driving on roads we don't even know. And sure enough, we have 3 teenagers, 2 boys and a girl. And anytime we've ever gotten into trouble is because we're listening to our teenage kids who go, so we're pulling down this road and we see a snow avalanche just took the road out. Whoops. A huge snow avalanche. So me and Carol go, it's time to turn around and find a different route. But of course, listening to our teenagers, they're like, we have Jeeps, we could do it. Let's go over the avalanche. And so we get out our, we have max tracks, all the traction boards, winches, whatever. And we just start working our way up. Sure enough, I put it in 4-wheel drive, get halfway up the thing. I think we can actually do this. And we just...
Fun.
We just worked our way across this avalanche with both Jeeps. And sure enough, we got to the other side.
Cool.
Which was, we're all high-fiving. We're in really good spirits going, that was fun. We made it. The road was clear for a little bit. And we think, okay, GPS 90 minutes, hour and a half. We could do this before dark. We keep going, and we're having so much fun talking and chatting on the radio, we don't realize our elevation is going higher and higher and higher. We get into a bit of snow. This was springtime. We just keep going. Then
unpredictable, though.
Totally unpredictable. It gets deeper and deeper. We're always like, we'll push through, right? Maybe it'll take us 2 hours. We'll get there anyway, and we're in grizzly country. We get stuck going downhill. That's how deep, and how the snow was like consistency of ice balls, that kind of stuff. You get
I also know it's very hard to get stuck going downhill.
So we went ourselves downhill because we could see some clear dirt on the road. The trail is a lot like a logging trail. We keep thinking we're going to get there. Let's just keep pushing.
And this is in snow right now, right?
It's a mix of snow and a bit of dirt here and there.
Caught up in your undercarriage, and it's too hard to dig out, essentially.
We'd get stuck. We'd pull a winch line 150 feet around a tree and just pull ourselves up. And the first Jeep would have to do that. The second one could follow in the tracks. We're what we called winching for inches. Like, it was just hard going. But we kept thinking over the next hill we'll be okay. That trip took us 3 days. What was supposed to be 90 minutes. We were up in Grizz country for 3 days. Wow. And we didn't end up making it to that village.
No. You just got your first chance to get out of there.
So we had such a positive mindset. We kept thinking we're going to make it, and we just kept going deeper and deeper into the backcountry, and the conditions got worse and worse, which is kind of stupid. But
it's also terrifying.
It's terrifying. Like day one, we get hopelessly stuck, and the sun's starting to go down. And we said, we're camping here because where else are you going to camp? We can't move. And we're in grizzly country, and we typically feel comfortable sleeping way up on top of the Jeeps in a tent. But now, because we're stuck in the snow, like the tents were hip height for me almost, or maybe shoulder height.
Wow.
So you're right at feeding level.
Right
for
at
the
eye
Grizz.
level, feeding level. Yeah.
Anyway, so we camped there the first night, made a fire, and we thought in the morning we'll make it to the town. And we pushed the whole next day, winching, getting stuck. There were times where we didn't even film, and we're laying under there with the shovel, just trying to dig these things out. Because it was about 3 feet or so, 4 feet deep, and if you broke the surface, you'd go right down. Anyway, another whole night we got stuck again. We camped there, got up the next morning, and it started raining, and I thought we're duck now. We're done for, right? Now we have satellite comms, so we could always call for help, but we never want to do that. What happened though, the rain started to change the consistency of the snow in our favor. So we thought it was the end of the trip. It actually was, it helped us. And we got into a point where this town just was moving, or we just weren't getting to it. But it was like, I just said, we have to start making decisions now. We're running out of fuel. We're never going to get to this town. Let's go back. And everyone's like, are you kidding me? After 3 days? But
well, you know, you'd broken trail essentially to get to where you had been, right?
Yeah.
And it was that you're at that point where it's either we risk getting this town, we don't know, and potentially run out of fuel, or definitely we can turn around and get back, and we know we could make it because we just came from that way.
And it was one of those decisions we just had to make, and we all said, okay, let's do this. Now we're in a place where there was no trees at the time and nothing to winch to, so turning around was almost impossible. But I did like a 38-point turn,
right?
And then I squeezed by the other Jeep, wheels just squeaking against each other, actually driving up on the other wheel. And then I was able to turn the other Jeep around, or my son did. And then we put them both together with the winch cable and started working our way back. And so if we got stuck, if the front Jeep got stuck, he would pull me back.
So you drove kind of like elephants.
Like 8 wheels now, right?
Yeah, like so. Okay, so he'd winch you up moving backwards. If you got stuck, he'd winch you up going forward.
I would pull him if he got stuck, right? And yank him out. And we just worked our way all the way back. And then we're at the avalanche again. But we were already cheering at that point because we had almost made it out of there. We still had fuel. And then we had to cross the avalanche again. But again, we followed our tracks and it went pretty good. And then we're now in the middle of BC mountains. And the one vehicle, the older one, is a 2012. It ran out of fuel, but thankfully right by a beautiful camp spot along the Kootenay River. So we just pulled in for the night and camped. One vehicle out of fuel. One's got, we don't know how much, maybe a quarter tank or something, or less. So had a good night's sleep, and then in the morning with the one Jeep, Carol and I went all the way into a little town called, I can't remember offhand, grabbed some fuel, went all the way back. So
by that time you knew you could make it out. At least one Jeep would make it out. So even if that ran out of fuel, one vehicle could go refuel the next one.
Yeah.
And then you could go and make it out there.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's wild, man. Wow. I honestly, that for anybody that doesn't know that sort of anxiety when you start heading into places like that. Now I've done some, my kind of overlanding trips have been a lot more tame, but I've been on some roads like that where, I wasn't really on an overlanding trip, and it's, I'm white knuckled. I'm just like, this isn't fun, like that's what I'm thinking, right? I'm like, I don't like, and just amazing that probably that whole trip wasn't fun, but it's just amazing that this is the kind of thing that you're doing for fun, which to me is just takes a lot of guts and experience, man.
Yeah, you don't want to put yourself in a crazy situation on purpose. We kind of worked our way into that. We do like the challenge. We do love adventure.
Well, you got out fine.
We got out fine. And what impressed us was we had 3 teenage kids, and they didn't complain once. They pulled together. So I guess we had already been on the road for 4 years at this point. Everything they had learned came into play here. And it was like, we can sit here and whine and complain, but the only way out of here is we're going to have to work really hard. And it was hard work. Yeah, I mean, we got video of Carol pulling 150 feet of line out over and over again. We're all taking turns. The stupid thing is we had just come up from the Mexican border. So it was 2020. We had gone down. We were going to spend the winter in Baja and stuff. And then COVID hit, and they said, you got to get home. We're like, oh, really? So we raced home, but all of our packing was summer stuff. So we had the bare minimum of boots. We weren't fully wintered up. We had jackets. We'd put on 3 layers. So you got
to run the Jeeps for warmth sometimes and suck up more gas.
We were sucking up gas, just staying warm. Yeah. But it turned out to be an amazing experience watching the kids pull together, and man, the high fives at the end once we got out. Like I think I actually kissed the ground for the first time. I was talking about it. I saw dirt road. I pulled over. I'm like that, because we had seen nothing but deep snow and ice for 3 days. So it was a neat experience.
So is this normally like an ATV trail kind of thing, or is it? It's actually a road.
It's like a logging road.
So it's something that's typically used, was maybe used in the winter, but when they were logging in the area, but they're not anymore.
Yeah, it was just buried. I mean, that whole section was just buried in snow.
So one of the things that is you're going in there with is your overlanding, which is essential. First of all, you're doing this with your family,
Yeah.
right? So anybody that knows your YouTube channel, Epic Family Road Trip, you're on the road with your kids all together as a family unit doing these things. But if you could tell me or just explain a little bit more about what overlanding is.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, probably when we were kids, it was called car camping, But the industry in the last 5-10 years has really taken off, where companies are coming out with amazing tents that you can attach to your vehicle. Right now, the Jeep you saw outside, it has a lift. It's got a winch built into it. It's got everything you need to live, right? We had slide-out fridges and stoves and propane, auxiliary fuel tanks. This one you can sleep downstairs and upstairs, and so it's like a camper but packed into a four-wheel drive. So overlanding is really just exploring remote places by vehicle.
Yeah,
Motorized
vehicle supported adventure travel.
go.
Would
Yep.
that be a good way to sum it up?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And trying to find the road that nobody goes on, the most remote place you can find. You do that a lot by canoe and walking, and that's even crazier. When we started, the kids were in their early teens. Like my youngest son was 12 years old. We came from a house where you have the four walls. We had this crazy idea to go do this, but we hadn't even heard of overlanding, so we bought a motorhome. And that gave us the walls and a bit of the feeling of, we could park in an unknown place and feel a little bit safe at least. And we did that for a year and hit all the national parks and everything. But then the kids we were towing our Jeep, and the best fun they had was when we parked the motorhome, we'd take the Jeep, down the old Denali Highway or something way into the backcountry. And so we said, let's just go straight up Jeeps and overlanding,
And then so you kind of figured out, whoa, what you saw the odd overlanding rig. What are those guys doing? Oh, we're doing that. Right. And oh, wait, that's what I want to do. Yeah.
And we thought the kids would want to get fancier and fancier and more comfort, and they wanted exactly the opposite. They're like, when we're in the Jeep, we can hear an elk bugling, or I can hear the river. And
I can go down and explore this road because I don't have my trailer paranoia where I'm not going to be able to turn around.
Right. And we don't have to be on paved all the time. We don't have to park in campgrounds where somebody's parked right beside us. And that was the dream. And so we switched over to Jeeps. And we actually were back then able to fit all of us into one Jeep. It's just at this point, it's mind-boggling because my daughter as well, everyone's 6 foot plus, right? You could never get them in now. But back then we went to one Jeep, decked it all out, and we actually put it in a shipping container and sent it to New Zealand. And spent 6 months living on the beaches and the mountains there, and that's a really wild place, especially the South Island.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard I've seen some of your videos and stuff from there. But at what point, go back a bit, you got into this because you wanted to spend essentially some more time and travel with your family.
Yeah.
But at what point were you thinking, okay, is this something we can realistically do full time? I mean, that's the difference. A lot of people go out there and they do it for a bit, they do an adventure in a bit, but you're literally living on the road. Right. Other than your cabin, your off-grid cabin where you spend quite a bit of time, even the past year, you're just more or less living on the road other than that place now?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was a huge difference from what we lived before, going into the office every day, living in a house, being stationary, and a vacation, you go somewhere and you sit on the beach and you go home. We kind of worked our way into it, but our main goal back then was to spend time with our kids. We knew we had maybe a 5 to 7 year window where they would grow up and be on to their own careers and so on in their own lives. So that's when Carol and I had this crazy idea. We wrote down on a sticky note, 3-month road trip within 5 years. At the time, I couldn't take 3 days off, let alone 3 months. I was in a landscaping business. Me and my brothers started. We didn't have any money. We borrowed a lawnmower, started mowing lawns, built this up to a decent-sized business all around the outskirts of Toronto, the Caledon area, Mississauga, Brampton. And then we started franchising the business. And
how old were you when you started doing the franchising?
That was a good 10 years into it, so I'm in my late 20s. It just
because so many people, I mean, I did that. So many
Yeah.
people, like I remember when I was about that age, it was like, oh, another guy owns a landscaping business. Like it seemed like such a thing that people could do and get into.
it's the easiest thing to get, the least barriers of entry. You don't need a lot of money. You can borrow a lawnmower. I mean, we borrowed my dad's an old rickety trailer.
And you can call it landscaping when really you're just mowing lawns too.
Exactly.
It sounds like way
It sounds
fancy.
great.
That's what I did.
Yeah, so we hear that from everyone. Oh, I did that when I was a kid, or I did that to get through school, or but we stuck to it. And what I heard all the time was, when are you going to get a real job? You know,
Right.
But we could see a future in it, and built it up. And by doing good customer service, we were able to grow and attract good people to the team. So when we got the idea to franchise, it had been done in the lawn spraying industry, but not in the mowing.
Yeah.
And so we over the years, you know, a lot of work, of course, and crazy times, but we were able to expand.
Sounds
to
kind of
200.
exciting, man.
It was.
Sounds pretty exciting for it to be, you know, at a relatively young age and say, hey, we're going to franchise this business that we started. But then did life get easier or harder after that?
You know, for the first year, it seemed to get easier, but then we realized, wait a minute, we're just taking time off. If we want to grow the franchise side, I had to go back to school, become a certified franchise executive, and really learn that business. Or you put out 8 locations and then you're done. We grew to over 200, and so I became busier and busier. My kids were growing up, and I would go on these trips to training programs or conferences, and I'd come back and say to Carol, like, I don't like how the business is taking me away from my most important thing, which is my family. Like, the kids are either going to grow up hating me or hating the business, or probably both, right? What can we do? And Carol said, I've been thinking about that, and I thought, what if we were to homeschool the kids? And then maybe we can take them with us we'll all go together on these trips.
Nice.
And I thought, that's a good idea if the kids are down with that. And so they were, and we did, and we started traveling before.
I would have been
we sold
down
the
with that,
business.
man. I would have been like, hey, do you want to leave school for extra, you know, other than my friends and that, right?
Right.
I would have been like, all right.
Yeah, they loved it. And so at first we got to see all the big cities because all my conferences were there. And then we got acquired in 2016, or we sold the business. We rolled it all in the U.S. and Canada into one company. And I had a choice. I was getting offered executive positions, and I was like, oh, on to my next career. But then Carol and I were talking and going, you know what, our kids are only with us for these 6-7 years. What if we were to do something absolutely crazy and go on a road trip? And so that's how it all got started. And here we are 8 years later, we're still at it.
Man,
because we just love it.
Oh, that's wild. So you got into it a bit. You said, let's just go on a road trip. You know, and you know, you I guess you had some savings, but this you're not out there working either.
No.
So you have to find a way. So I guess that's sort of how the YouTube side of things evolved as well, right?
For 2 reasons. One, we needed something if the kids said, we want to go forever. We're like, nice dream. But I said, okay, but we got to learn how to make money on the road. Because we're going to run out of savings, and then you're going to have to walk home. So so that's kind of how the YouTube came out of it.
And so your kids loved it, though.
They loved it.
Got out there, and because a lot of people might be worried, oh, maybe they won't like this. Maybe they're going to miss their video games and their friends and this kind of stuff. And so how old were they when you started this?
Like 12, 14, 16.
Okay.
And and they were in regular school. They came out of regular school for a couple of years, but they still hung out with their friends and everything. That's why we said 3 months. You know, anyone can do 3 months, and we'll find out during that time if they hate it. We'll just go back and get a job and do.
Right.
But they loved it, and they were more adventurous than us. They couldn't wait to get around the next corner. Couldn't wait to get into more adventurous stuff. Let's get rid of the motorhome. Let's go Jeeps. You know, that was all their impetus. They're pushing. New Zealand was my daughter's idea. She had always dreamed of it, and we're like, we know nothing about New Zealand. So I said, why don't you put a PowerPoint together and sell the family on the whole idea?
That's awesome.
And she did. She sat there.
Well, that's a great lesson. You could check one off on the homeschooling box for that.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So she learned everything she could about the language and the people and the Maori people and what places we would see and roughly what it would cost. She was way off, but she had an idea. She put some thought to it, and she sold us on the idea, and we went. But
so how'd you get your vehicle there?
It just drove into a shipping container.
Okay.
And it's not that expensive. People go, wow, I could never do that.
It's the slow boat to New Zealand.
Yeah, it took, There's a whole story behind that too, because it was supposed to arrive, but the Hurricane Andrew went through and blew out all the ports through the Panama.
Oh,
I'll never ship to that
Hurricane
area.
Andrew?
Or what? Not Andrew. I can't remember what.
Because Hurricane Andrew was it wasn't that long ago, I think. Hurricane
2016.
Anyways, who cares? Big
Yeah,
hurricane.
one of these hurricanes. It knocked out a lot of ports through the Panama. And so had we just driven across to BC and shipped from there, it would have been 19 days, but it had to go down the East Coast through the Panama and all the way across the Pacific. So we learned some lessons about shipping.
Wow.
But so our Jeep didn't arrive when we did initially. So we rented a little vehicle. And we learned there. That's where we learned how to live in tiny, small areas. We bought a tent, 2 tents, and a jet boil. And we would make full meals out of the jet boil. And then when the Jeep arrived, all of a sudden it felt like we had just moved into a mansion,
Right.
We went from a tent to a slightly bigger tent, but it was, and it had a big side tent. That's where the kids were. And they'd set up cots in there. They could do their homeschool.
How long were you there for?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. Wow. And so you must have seen quite a bit of
Every square foot of that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
so there was a pretty famous, for a sad but famous kind of event that happened with a bunch of whales. You were there for that, weren't you?
Yeah. So we were the place called Abel Tasman National Park. It was on my daughter's list. It was her bucket list item. And we had just secured a place there, set up camp, and gone on our first hike. And we get back and the phone's going ding, ding, ding. And people from here, friends and family from Canada and the U.S. saying, are you guys anywhere near that whale beaching? We're watching it on national television. And we hadn't heard about it, so I Googled it real quick. And sure enough, it was on the South Island, but in the most remote place called Farewell Spit. And they were calling out for volunteers, but they also gave a warning saying there's no food or water source anywhere near. So come equipped or don't come at all because you'll be in danger.
You're just going to make things
Make
even
it
harder.
worse.
Yeah.
So we're fully equipped. We have a fridge full of food, propane, fuel, everything we need. So I was just Googling it, and I look back, and the kids are dismantling the whole camp we had just set up, and they're like, we're going. I'm like, okay, it's a 4-hour drive through the windy roads. And up we went, and we get there as the sun was going down, and there's a volunteer group called Project Jonas. There's a setup, and they're like, thanks for coming. Nothing we can do at night because sharks and stingrays come in. Some of the whales had already perished. There was a bunch. By the time they were discovered, some had already perished, but there was 120 still alive, and they said, set up your camp here on the beach. Meet us at 5 in the morning, and we're going to do a briefing on whale first aid and your safety. They're pilot whales, which is in the orca family, but they're not aggressive, but their teeth will take your leg off if
Wow.
by accident if you're not careful.
They bite you. So how many whales were beached there total?
Man, it was like 200. Like at least, it was. They call it the worst. We have a video of the guy saying this is the worst whale beaching in recorded history.
So what is it with these whales just beaching themselves?
So
like, was it a pod that was that big? There was a 200 whale pod
super
together?
pod, yeah. And I can explain what happens, because that was my first question, what happened here? So Farewell Spit has really rapid tides, and it's very shallow in one section. And what a youngster will get in there and get caught. And so I'll explain. So we do that briefing. It's a 5-kilometer walk out to where the whales are. The tide's out at this point. We all head out there and we start bucketing water. They gave us buckets and sheets, bed sheets. You put bed sheets on them, bucket water on them to keep them cool, comfortable, and calm. That's the 3 C's.
Do the whales, can you tell? Or they're like, that's better? You're like, can you see their reactions or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the whales was their eyes, and they're looking at you just going, like almost to say, like, I'm a complete acrobat underwater, one of the most intelligent mammals in the ocean. Mm-hmm. But right now, I need your help. Like, I can't move. I'm tons and tons of blubber laying there. Some of them on their side. And so they got guys mine and your size, and they're like, hey, come here, mate. We're pushing them up. So our job was to push them up and then put sand against them, because they breathe from the blowhole. And if the tide comes in and they're on their side, they can drown.
Right.
So we're racing against time because the tide was going to be coming in. Meanwhile, the kids are bucketing water and keeping them from drying in the sun. Their skin is like paper, and if it gets the sun, that's how they die. It bubbles up, and then they They die. So
sounds like a really miserable way to die.
yeah. So we're racing against time, and then the tide starts coming in. It comes in really rapidly. Like in no time, it's up to our ankles, then to our knees. And we had 1 to 2 volunteers per whale at that point. They were coming in throughout the day. And I was on a big whale by myself right by the ocean. And so the water got deeper there than the guys way in the back. And all of a sudden he was buoyant, and he was still scraping, but I pushed with all my might, got him out, and he actually was floating. And so that was the first whale freed, and everybody cheered, and he swam into the bay, and then he turned around. He came right back and re-beached.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
And
I thought he was going to come turn around and be like, thanks, and like wave with his flipper or something.
He re-beached, and then a guy from the Department of Environment or whatever they call it over there came over, and he said, hey, I appreciate what you tried to do, but these whales are so pod-oriented, they will not swim away from each other.
Right.
They're such a tight family.
Yeah, so you have to get them all in at the same time.
Yeah, he said.
Because it's like, I don't want to leave everybody. I got to catch back up to them or something.
Exactly.
So, okay.
And that answers why they get stuck in the first place, because an inexperienced calf will get stuck, and the whole pod will come in to save them, and they all end up getting stuck. So, so he said, what we're going to do is when the largest ones, the big matriarch in the back, when they're floating, then we'll give a command to push, and then it'll echo across the whole valley, and everybody push at the same time. And so we waited, and it got deeper and deeper. My son's like 14 years old, and it's up to his chest. He was working all day on this one whale. They named it Up because he's with a lady from another country who couldn't speak English, so she named it Up. So he's like, I'm not leaving Up no matter what. Even if I got to swim out of here, I'm like, okay, stick with it. And all of a sudden we heard the call to push, and so we began pushing. Mine went out. I ran over, got another one. Everyone starts pushing, and soon all the whales are free, and they swim into the bay. And then they said, because some of their mates had perished already, they said, form a human chain. So we all grabbed hands and formed a human chain all across the bay and started yelling and splashing. And
so they wouldn't come back?
So they wouldn't come back.
Because they're coming back to try to check on the rest of the... How isn't it amazing that they can tell that quickly that certain numbers of them are missing?
Yeah, they're intelligent. The pilot whales can recognize, they say... a whale that they haven't seen in 2 years. I don't know how they study this kind of stuff, but they have that kind of facial recognition. Even 2 years, they'll tag 2 whales, and they come back and they know they can recognize.
How many died?
At least 100.
Oh man,
it was insane, and a lot of calves and their moms right there. Oh. It was crazy. But these 120, we got them into the bay. We held hands, and stopped our feet as it got deeper. And then, they make these loud distress calls on land, but underwater they can be heard for like 25, 30 kilometers out to sea. And another pod of whales had been swimming somewhere in the ocean and heard these distress calls and rerouted into the bay, the Golden Bay there. And so now we thought we had 120 out there. Now there's almost 200 whales breaching and splashing in front of us.
Okay, so those are a remainder of the pod maybe that hadn't beached?
No, apparently... We heard later what had happened is this other pod of whales had come in to adopt this family into theirs.
Oh, okay.
And eventually some of the young calves had lost their mom and everything. It was just a mess. And so this family came in and adopted this whole family. This is what the Department of
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And so bit by bit, they went further and further out, and then a dinghy came and chased them, and then a helicopter we could see in the distance. And eventually they were gone, and they never came back.
So sad occurrence, but a pretty, happy story that you were able to do something in the end.
Yeah, better 120 getting out.
That sounds emotional, man.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you're on adrenaline all day, working harder than you've ever done. And, that night we get back to our camp and we're like, what do you guys want for dinner to the kids? And they were all out sleeping.
Oh, bad.
They're done.
What an experience. And so you're putting yourself out there, doing these things, shipping your vehicle in a freighter container to New Zealand. And then this random, amazing, and also sad things happen, but you're able to just actually help this catastrophic kind of event at the same time that sort of came up and out of nowhere. Are those kind of spontaneous and, almost random things part of what makes you love this sort of travel lifestyle and overlanding specifically?
Absolutely, yeah. That's really what it's about. We said to the kids when we decided to go full time, we had core values in business, we said we need to have some kind of core values. Otherwise, we're going to lose our way out here. So we came up with 3 things: work, play, and care. So we said we got to work hard to make money, to get through school. Your homeschool is now competing with a beautiful surf break that's 100 feet from where you're sitting. You're going to have to work a lot harder to finish that before you do that. So work was our number 1 value, and I had learned without hard work, you're not going to get anything.
Well, you actually used to work as a landscape. You were the guy pushing the lawnmower,
Absolutely.
digging, all this kind of stuff. Is very physical, hands-on kind of guy.
I did 5 years as a laborer, pulling branches, raking leaves.
So you understand the importance of that, though.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we wanted to instill those same values in our kids. So work hard, play hard, because we at the time I was like, there's a epidemic of anxiety and stress in the world, and if only we could learn to play like we did when we were kids. You don't see anxious kids; they're just playing. A mud puddle, jump in it, right? So that was our second value. And then care, we said we'll try to leave the people we meet and the places we visit a little better than we found them. And so that became our motive and our kind of purpose for traveling. And then I think those things, because you're clear on what you're about, those opportunities present themselves, So when they said, hey, we can go up and help the whales, you don't hesitate because that's what we're here for. Boom, you go. A lot of people said, oh, that's too bad. And they carried on with what they were doing.
So you had so you gave yourself a little outline, little kind of a mission statement, if you will, something like that. And then that helps you when cool, interesting, not so interesting, whatever comes in your path while you're out there doing it, really doing it. That helps you make a decision faster on if it's something that is in line with what you've all kind of agreed on or not. Yeah.
I think that Walt Disney said that, when values are clear, decision making is easy.
Oh, okay.
Because
you wouldn't need a whole PowerPoint presentation at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, when you know what your goals are, so for young families thinking of doing this, have some clarity of what you're about. Otherwise, it's really easy to lose your way in terms of like, what are we actually doing? Are we just traveling around? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it was Tim Ferriss. I read a book called 4 Hour Work Week, or I listened to it. And he said, too much of one thing, it actually can become its opposite.
Huh.
So too much vacation and you're like, I can't wait to get to work.
Right.
Too much work and it's like, I got to get out of here. So we always tried to keep a variety of what we're doing. That's why the cabin. Sometimes if we needed to get off the road, we had this place which was just paradise to put our feet down and listen to the loons.
That's where you're staying at now.
Yeah.
But you've had sort of before, so you'd go and you'd travel on these trips and then you'd come back to your cabin, which is on an island in a water access, obviously only in a remote part of northern Ontario.
Yeah.
And so you'd spend a little bit of time there each year, most years. Recently, well, I guess not so recently, but it had been 2 years since you'd even had a home base at all.
That was our longest stint.
Yeah.
2021, and then we came back in 22. And that whole time we spent in the mountains of BC. We were wherever we could go, and we spent some time in Montana and throughout the States.
So do you kind of sometimes dip down south when the Canadian winter hits and do some exploring in the States?
We had done that. So we went to New Zealand in November, which was their summer.
Right.
And we did Australia. We did a bit of Indonesia. So and then we'd go south. We'd chase summer until we couldn't cross the border a couple of years ago. And then we're like, man, we have to overwinter in Canada, and we live in tents. So we started driving west as far as we could, and we ended up in Tofino and spent a winter on the island, which is cold and rainy, as you very well know.
Oh my gosh, I'm watching these videos, which are really interesting, and the know-how obviously comes through. You did a bit of a tour of some guys that know the trails out there a bit better, and you come up to this river and it's like deep, and it's flowing fast. And the guy's like, oh yeah, we can probably just bomb across it. I'm just thinking like, there's no way you could ever bomb across. I'm just like, I can't, I'm like, obviously this guy knows what he's doing. Well, he got into it and then just to test it out and then decided not a good idea.
He started pushing downstream, so he backed out as fast as he could.
Yeah, so he's not a good idea. And if I'm going to get stuck, well, the other vehicles that aren't as capable as this one definitely would run into problems, right?
Yeah.
That was in the rainy season when you were like in November.
Yeah, November, December, January. We spent the whole winter there. And what we learned from the locals, like they'll say you'll see a river crossing that you can do, and you're tempted, you do it, you go camp in a beautiful place. You come back the next day to get out, and the water levels have gone up, double.
And you're waiting.
And you're stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not getting out till they go down, and nobody knows when. So
yeah,
it was, we had to learn a lot about the local camping out there and doing overlanding.
Yeah, I watch your videos and I'm just like, well, that's a lot of rain. Just a
Yeah.
lot. And you're soaked and you're like, wow, this is just epic day on the trails. And I'm like, man, that looks miserable. And it was like, I was getting PTSD from watching it because of my experience on alone in the rainiest November in history for what's a very rainy place.
Yeah.
But that, of course,
It's
that
relentless.
Right.
And you're soaked to the bone.
Yeah.
And those are good, character building times too. Like
It still looked like a hell of an adventure, though.
It was, yeah. It was incredible. And we almost once a week got at least a half a day, sometimes a full day of sun. And that was you just appreciate the sun so much.
Right.
And the temperatures are reasonable out there. They don't get much below zero, at least in lower elevations. In you get to higher elevations and it's snow everywhere. So we survived the first winter without chasing summer. And then we did a whole 2-year stint, it was amazing, but we were tired when we wanted to get back to the island. And so that's, I think in that video, you hear the relief in our voices. We're like, oh my goodness, it's so nice to get off the road for a bit and put our feet down here.
And just see this this kind of friendly place that too. And
Familiarity,
right.
You know everything about it, because one thing about being on the road is you never know where you're going to camp the next night. And that's the challenge. And at first, people said, you're going from 100 miles an hour as the CEO of a business to zero. And I'm like, no, but with this overlanding lifestyle, it wasn't zero. I'm taking care of a family. I have 3 kids.
Way more terrifying.
Way more. I'm
with
occupied all the time. Yeah. I don't know where we're going to be camping tonight. I don't know the people. I don't know if it's safe. We learned situational awareness and how to find good, safe camp spots. But I mean, what we'd call safe, others would call it terrifying. But we're in grizzly country. We're in all kinds of challenges that you could run into, but you learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from too, because sometimes it's those times where you really don't know where you're going to camp. It's getting dark. You can't find any good spots. But sometimes that's where the coolest experiences of all come from, because you're not planning ahead and finding a campground. You're trying to get some information on an app or on a map or from locals or just from driving around till you find something, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when we were driving out towards the road, Quebec, I think it's 518 or something, the road that goes up to the Trans-Labrador Highway. And we ended up, where are we going to go? We can't go, just like all freaking out. It's getting dark, arguing. We ended up driving under this really cool covered bridge and finding a spot right on the Gulf of the St. Lawrence with a crazy view, and then behind us and a full moon, almost a full moon, and then behind us having this insanely beautiful Northern Lights display.
Oh, wow.
And so we just have this campsite, there's these cliffs, this St. Lawrence, Northern Lights behind it. Was like the best night of the entire adventure, and it was like a gong show, but that made it that much sweeter.
Yeah, it's amazing how that often happens, Even though we were watching you on the Stikine and it's pouring rain for days, and then you found that cabin, and it wasn't presenting itself. It wasn't where you expected it or whatever.
No.
But it always seems at the worst time, you're starting to panic, it's getting dark, and then you end up in just a perfect place. And that's been our experience all
It's
these
like
years.
if you keep your wits about you. Right, when you're in those situations, and it doesn't have to be a survival situation, but when it comes to that, when people talk about survival, it's like step 1, don't panic. Right. Step 2, shelter, fire, water, food, right? Yeah. And then all this information goes into shelter, water, food. But the hardest one is don't panic.
Yeah.
But how do you draw like diagrams of psychology in a survival book?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's one that everybody kind of glazes over. You can start worrying about all those other things if you just, okay, we're going to be fine. fine. We're going to find somewhere cool. You think positively, you keep searching for it. You don't snap. Like a lot of people, they get their truck stuck, they just start snapping and swearing and losing it. Like you would not have made it very far if that was your attitude, right?
We would have been calling in a helicopter to come get us, the search and rescue type thing.
Yeah, 2 years on the road too, man. Like that's exhausting. I've been, on the road for about a month, about 5 weeks, and with younger kids for sure, and not as much cool exploring spots like you, more like main sort of highways where you're sort of driving. So what you're doing is much more visually and appealing to the adventurous kind of spirit. Like I could spend a lot more time in some of those places, but yeah, we're happy to get home, man. So I know that I love the trip too at the same time, but I know that's not an easy endeavor. That's something to be pretty to brag about for sure. Not that you're
especially
bragging,
keeping everybody on board as a family, right? Because some will be down. That's when everyone else kind of lifts that person up. And it's something we had to learn. Believe me, we weren't like that when we left on the trip, but we learned you only have two ways of reacting to this situation. You can panic or curse it out, or just have a positive attitude. Right. It's going to make a big difference in how it.
And you have everything there with you.
That's the thing.
You ever been to Red Bear Outdoors in Toronto, by the way?
I haven't.
You got to go. It's such a cool little store. They're not a sponsor, but but yeah, really cool. Just a small store, but they have they can order stuff, but they have all this overlanding stuff that they just everything that you need, all kinds of cool stuff. You should check out. They're in Toronto though, but yeah, I've literally driven down to that store to buy specific things before my trips. You know what I mean?
Well, that's good. That's good because there was a time where most of this stuff wasn't in Canada yet, so it's good to see that someone's.
It's really just doing that. Oh man, look at how much more money I need to spend on gear.
It is a bottomless pit once you get into it.
I'm literally building a garage just for my gear. Yeah. But yeah, it happens. So
we tell families they watch our videos, and the last thing we want is a family to go up in the mountains unprepared and be stuck for 3 days in grizzly country and not have a way to get out or even to call for help. So we always say, here's what we have: food, lots of food. We have heat. We have auxiliary fuel. So the, food, water, we have filters for water. We're, the lake's everywhere. We break the ice, get some water, filter it, drink it. And worst case scenario, we have sat columns to get someone to come get us. So you're going into risky stuff, but you're also taking the precautions.
And I guess in that situation, you could get back in and get your vehicles once the snow melted. So you're not leaving them stuck on a frozen lake or something, right?
Right. Yeah, where it sinks to the bottom. Right. Yeah. But you were talking about how do you control your mind, and that's something you have to learn because initially the panic starts with all the what if scenarios. Well, this could happen, that could happen, and it gets worse and worse, and then you got to stop yourself and go, wait a minute. Why worry about what hasn't even happened yet? Let's just deal with what we have now, right? And then you calm down and you can think clearly. But yeah, I was thinking we're going to have to leave our vehicles here. We're going to get flown out. We're going to have to somehow get away back in here in the summer. It could be 2 months from now by the time it melts, right? Some of those trails actually don't melt till mid-July or something.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, and then they get freaking snow again in August sometimes too, right? Not that it stays, but I mean a snowstorm in August at an elevation like that in BC, Alberta is not uncommon. Yeah, I heard somebody say the other day, why do we always pile up bad thoughts on ourselves? Why don't we ever start trying to pile up positive thoughts? Right. And it actually works a bit too. And this is a great, technique to use when you're in these situations, when you're in the bush and mountains, remote locations, is instead of thinking we're not going to get stuck, we're not going to do this. You just be like, you know what? We have enough food with us, and guess what? If we get stuck, well, it's going to be such a great story, and we're just going to have to work really hard. But I think part of the problem is with people is that they think there's never going to be an end. Right. And I listened to my wife's story about the 6-kilometer portage we did. That was a bushwhack through a half burnt forest with piled up logs on each other. It's that she's just thinking, this is never going to end. Right. But if you just know, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to get out of here. I think it goes a long way too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had situations where we're stuck at 13,000 feet in Colorado at night. We got into that same kind of situation where at the end of it, we made it out alive, and we were just we made it out alive. But we got ourselves into trouble by listening to the boys again. They're like, well, me and Carol it's sun's going down, we should find a camp spot. They're like, well, let's just do one more pass. Well, it happened to be the biggest pass with multiple mountain passes. And Anyway, we're up there in the pitch black doing shelf roads just wide enough for the Jeep, and we had to drop.
Wow.
We were at 13,000 feet. We camped at 10,000, so we went down 3,000 feet on a straight zigzag face in pitch black.
What gradient?
Like, I don't know, but it's like this. So you're going down a steep, and it's mostly designed. Jeeps were the maximum size vehicle you could get on there. We'd get to the end, and you have to nose out to the abyss, and you're talking 2,000 feet. You're dead if you go over there. Your brakes are squeak, squeak, and then you put it in reverse, and you back up, and then you go down another one. Same thing. Back
Man,
up.
you're from Ontario.
I
It's
know.
taken a lot to get to that point where it sounds
did.
like something you'd see in the Andes in an Indiana Jones movie or something.
We went down to Utah on our first trip. And I remember getting into canyon lands, and there's 1,000-foot cliffs everywhere, and the Jeeps go crazy there up these shelf roads. And I remember bellying up to the edge with the boys and with the kids and just going, seeing a Jeep on a shelf road way down there. I said, never. You will never catch me on one of those. I'm a guy from Ontario. Like, I was white knuckling it up just a paved road, right? And then, sure enough, never say never, because over time you develop your skills and your competency and confidence. But, people say, what gear do I need to have on my vehicle to do what you're doing? Start with what you have. You don't need anything really except the basics: food, water, shelter, and communications. The more fancy stuff you put on your vehicle, the more trouble you're going to get yourself into. If we didn't have all that stuff and we saw an avalanche, it would be a no-brainer. You wouldn't even have a conversation. You'd turn around and go, right? So you wouldn't have got yourself in this situation. Because we knew we were capable, we're like, let's give it a try. And we go. So be careful what you put on your Jeep.
Right. Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, well, if you have a winch, well, now you're going to put yourself in a place where you need to use it, right? It's a lot of people that do remote wilderness trips in the Arctic, they don't bring wetsuits or dry suits because sometimes if you're wearing them all the time, you're actually colder. But, they're just like, we're not going to run anything over a class 2 where we would need one, like maybe bring one as a backup in case we lose a canoe kind of thing. But don't, it's a false sense of security. You get the same thing with people like, oh, we have a sat phone. Let's just get out there and be idiots without realizing like, no, the sat phone in those situations is to tell people like where they're going to find the body. Not they can't save you in time for that. Right. Yeah, so yeah, you don't want that false sense of security.
No. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. But, so, I mean, we've had crazy experiences. We've had just unbelievably rewarding experiences. But it was a graduation to the point where we're doing what we're doing now. And even with living on an island in the middle of nowhere, where you have a shoulder season, last 22, we said, okay, let's try a whole year. We had put in solar and batteries. We had put in...
well, you have a propane fridge with 100, so you get 100-pounders out there.
Yeah. So we kind of said, what do we need? Because they told us at that point, up until then, we bought this place 20 years ago, me and my brothers. And we'd go up for vacations, really, a week maximum at a time in the summer where it's easy going. You go in by boat and you go home.
Yeah, go fishing, have a camp.
It's just a fun place. Yeah. But summer is different than winter. We'd snowmobile in there from time to time, but for a weekend. But to actually make it through the shoulder season. So for those from far south that might be listening, that's where the ice starts to come on the lake. So you got to pull your boats out of the water. No, a boat can't get through the ice, but a snowmobile can't get on the ice because it's too thin. And you never know how long that's going to be. And the locals said, it could be 3 weeks for you. Well, the year we went up, it was 5 weeks. So we said we could be stranded on a 10-acre island for a month or more.
Right.
Do we have enough propane for heat? Firewood, we brought in tons of firewood. We cut from
Well, that's the other thing, too, is how much firewood you have on your island as well.
Right.
You're going to only have a certain amount.
And it's mostly softwood there. So
cedar, right?
We need a lot of pine and hemlock. Okay. So we needed some maple hardwood. And then we had to think in terms of food. So we have a solar freezer we had to fill with food. And just think through everything.
A solar freezer?
Like it's a 12-volt that runs. It's super efficient. Yeah, it's the most... I would never go back.
You're going to have to give me some of these. And the propane fridge, too, because the solar freezer sounds very interesting.
Well, now because propane, we have to lug it in there. We're always thinking, well, how can we be even more self-sufficient? We might switch to a solar fridge because except in the winter, like up here in the north part of Ontario, you don't get that much sun. That was a struggle we had. But You have a backup generator for that time. But anything that can run off of solar, it was a game changer for us.
You don't have to rely on somebody else to get these 100-pound tanks and put them on. And if the supply's gone or you can't get out there, you're pretty much hooped.
Yeah, so we're trying to move everything to these ultra efficient battery powered, with solar panels. It's been a game changer.
So where did the transition kind of come after you're on the road for a long time and you're kind of missing, obviously, why wouldn't you miss this cool remote cabin you have in Northern Ontario on a beautiful lake, of course? And at what point were you like, let's kind of switch things up a bit? Was it that much of a change, or was it harder? Was it easier? What was different? Because you're already doing this sort of adventure lifestyle, but you're kind of traveling these large distances as opposed to be more, based around, like a home base, essentially.
I mean, it's the same concept of adventure and the unknown.
Right.
But so where the challenge on the road is, where am I going to be tonight? And, you don't know the area. Here, it was other things like, the unknown of just what are we going to run into, and are we prepared for it? And what made us change was, when the border shut down, we thought we could live forever, just chase summer, right? Summer's up here, winter's down, summer warm. And then we couldn't cross. So we thought we better be prepared. Who knows what could happen in the world where we can't go summer warm. So we said, let's do an experiment. Let's get off the road and try a whole year up here and put the infrastructure in place. And so that's what we did. And it was one of the most, and can we even do 5 months as a family on a 10-acre island, or are we going to go nuts? Yeah. And it was just the most rewarding experience of our time as a family. And we did Christmas up there and decorated from the collected stuff off the island. And, got a tree, obviously finding a tree up there's not a problem. And just had an amazing time. And we had tons of food. We had tons of firewood, all the stuff we needed. We were getting low towards the end.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, but low as in we might have to eat some repetitive, unfavorable stuff, but we're not going to go hungry in a major way.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I said, I'm going to teach myself how to ice fish these big, beautiful trout we have here. They're hard to catch on that lake. Yeah. And after learning everything we could, I brought in a big, beautiful lake trout, and I feel comfortable now.
Have you ever thought about getting a Garmin Panoptics?
Oh yeah, is that the one where you can basically
expensive.
see them? Yeah,
reach out to them. It's like it's a fish finder on steroids essentially.
I've seen people using them; they're amazing.
Yeah, I was just using one up on the Yukon, and I'm like, man, this is when I was up in the Yukon. I'm like, this is kind of a game changer, right? If anything, just you don't have to sit there and have all this guesswork. You can just see your lure jigging, see your exact depth, and you can see fish when they're coming in. Yeah. So you can kind of get dialed in and get ready. Yeah. So it's just it definitely has just a mental kind of side to it.
Especially if you're relying on fish for food, right?
Yeah.
Some people say, well, that's cheating. You're taking out what you have to learn, but learn that anyway. No one's telling you not to learn that.
You probably could go spend the $3,000 on fun fish and not buy the Garmin Panoptics too. But that wouldn't last forever.
Yeah, but it was good to learn some of those primal skills of just being able to feed ourselves,
Yeah.
And so that was an amazing time, and we tested the ice every day to see if it's going to be thick enough, because at some point we wanted to get off the island, and just going to a place and having a burger was a luxury that we used to take for granted. And so me and the boys would go out further and drill, and then it would be 2 inches, so we'd come back. And then one day we felt it was thick enough, so we had these snow dogs. If you ever seen those, they're a lighter snow machine. You actually stand behind them. They pull a sled.
Yeah.
It's just a snowmobile track.
And then you stand on a sled kind of thing?
Yeah.
I have seen them. Yeah,
an early ice machine, right?
Oh, okay, cool.
So we took that one day, and we had put the drone up in the middle. It was the last to freeze. So we saw that it froze earlier along the edge of the lakes. So we started doing that. And one of my sons would drill a hole, he'd go, thumbs up, it's 4 or more inches. We'd drive past it. And did that all the way, and sure enough, one day we could see the marina.
Nice.
We're like, yes. Yeah. And so we actually turned around, and went right back, got Carol. Yeah. And like, Carol, we're going for a burger.
Nice.
We drove up to Clarendon.
And that was a 5-week wait though. That's a long time. I guess because this year was just really weird, eh? It's very.
Yeah.
Was that this?
That was 20. last year.
That was also a pretty warm winter too, right? So we came off of 3 pretty harsh winters, including one where there was flooding in the spring because we had about 8 or 9 feet of snow in Mag, anyways, where I'm from. And then the last 2 winters, and then school was closed 19 days due to snow. Sorry, 21 days due to snow and wind, and minus 35 for 2 weeks, and and overcast. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 winters have just been like opposite. They haven't been very fun because you can, the ice conditions are sketchy and all that.
We're glad we didn't. So that's why we have to get a fan boat. It was an El Nino cycle. So these last 2 years were warm and it'd probably get cold again. But we would have been stuck not for 5 weeks, but the whole winter. Like, I don't know what we would have done, right? Because I think people on the lake snowmobiled once in there.
Wow.
Yeah. So by the time it froze, they went in, they were like, oh, it didn't feel safe. And they left a few days later, and that was it. So if we're going to do it more, which we plan to, we have to have some kind of amphibious deal that can go on ice and snow, right?
Yeah, those are fun though. Yeah. When my brother and I grew up, we had a water access camp, and the guy beside us, or a couple doors down, we'll say, used to run a lodge there. He sold some of the cabins to my other neighbor and retired there, but went to Florida in the winters. But he lived there, raised his whole family there. He actually built a fan boat for himself. So there's a wooden propeller he used. He built the whole body, I guess, out of plywood and maybe some sort of tin or something on the bottom of it.
Fiberglass or something. Or maybe tin would do it.
Maybe.
You need something that will scrape across ice.
I don't remember. I don't know who I could even ask about that anymore. His son's a bush pilot now. Oh, wow. He took us up for a fly around the lake and stuff at one point. But anyways, that he used to get his kids on that and fire it up, and whatever the conditions were, get him to the road 7K away to get him on the school bus. So those are awesome freaking machines, man. Yeah. I'm sure you'll have no fun with that at all.
Oh, man. The boys, they're like, we'll use it all summer long.
Oh, we got to get a fan.
Man. So we got to ride on one. We have a guy that comes up to his camp up there every weekend, and he would take us in and out. So this winter
it's not very big, though.
No, it's a 3-seater, but it carries a fair bit of gear, so we could put all the groceries back there and get a ride in.
Right.
So it was a game changer for us. We came up. We spent the winter in Arizona, and doing all kinds of really cool trails.
Arizona's cool, man.
Yeah, we did some really remote stuff. One called El Camino del Diablo. That's a whole nother story.
What is the Del Diablo is of the devil?
Devil's Highway.
What's Camino again? What's
the road, I think.
So the road of the devil. Yeah. Oh man, it sounds like a metal album.
Yeah. Because awesome. For so many years, hundreds of bodies are buried along the sides because people would travel it back in the days. Extremely harsh conditions, but and then we came up for March, and so March we wanted a bit of Canadian winter, so we like that variety now. We try to too much of one thing, it becomes its opposite.
Like Canada geese, you're born in Canada, you're Canadians, but you might jump down south when the weather gets cold.
When the weather gets too bad.
No shame in that, right?
But we think every other year or every couple of years we'll do a winter again up here, sometimes somewhere else. But
so what are your plans? Are you going to are you thinking you're going to keep doing the cabin? Are you going to spend another year there, or are you thinking you're going to hit the road and maybe explore some more south of the border, or the Trans-Labrador Highway? You mentioned you made it to we made it to Red Bay or whatever.
Yeah. So when the kids were younger, we did a lot of stuff out in the East Coast, and that was an amazing experience. But I mean, for future plans, short term. So our family's evolved, right? It's been 8 years. So we started with little kids. They're now adults.
How old now?
In their 20s. So 20, 22, 24. Like, they're grown adults. The boys started their own channels. My daughter's been doing a year of service, just helping out with back home where my family is and with their church and in Europe and stuff. So she'll be done that soon, and she'll probably start a channel because she's very creative. And
what are your son's channels? Let's give them a shout out.
Yeah, so Pete is Adventure Guys, and Dan is just Dan Van Stralen. And Dan, so it's funny. So the kids, Dan, he goes, I've been to all these places in the world, but my favorite place is the island. So last year, Carol and I started going on solo trips. We went up to Tuktoyaktuk by ourselves. Dan stayed at the island by himself and got his channel off the ground. And Pete with Adventure Guys, he's done all kinds of, they have adventure bikes, so he's biked all over the place. But he also developed his skills to the point all three of them did to where they're professional or amateur or professional. They get hired. So I guess you'd call that professional videographers, cinematographers. So Pete did 2 months last fall in Southern Africa, Namibia, Botswana.
With
South
hanging out
Africa.
with some other people that are professional
Yeah,
filmmakers?
a group called X Overland. I'm actually wearing their hat. But they just released that 10-part series of Africa.
Oh, man, I got to check that
Yeah,
out.
and so Pete saw all of Africa through through a camera,
No
but
kidding.
it was an amazing experience.
Where did overlanding kind of start? Was it in Africa? Was it in Australia?
Both South Africa and Australia, where
Okay.
they've had that for many, many years.
Because it was people kind of pushing vehicles, Range Rovers and stuff like that, deep into kind of deserts and off-roading sort of places, right?
Because in both those countries, especially Australia, to go from one city to the next, you got to drive like 14 hours through the outback, right? So they would camp overnight. So they've got it's been around for a long time over there. But
because you hear certain things like when I was in the Yellowhead Highway in I guess Alberta, right near the BC border. There's a plaque there dedicated to the overlanders that went across the Canada and crossed the Rockies from Ontario, 150 years ago, and they called them overlanders. I guess
they're
they
the
would
originals.
Have,
I guess.
I guess they had wagons and horses, and then dumped some stuff here and crossed the mountains and rebuilt wagons. I don't know exactly.
Much tougher people than us.
Yeah.
As we've been traveling, we've been going to these museums and learning about the people that first traveled. It's just crazy what they went through because there was just primitive roads, So that they, I guess, were the original overlanders, and I guess it's just exploring countries by vehicle, which slows you down a little bit. Fly over is one thing, you fly to a couple places and go home. This really entrenches you in the places you're visiting.
Well, and then it's overlanding too. It's more of it's about the journey in and of itself, much like a canoe trip is. But it's also just a means of transportation for other adventures. The campsites you find, the hikes you do on the sides, the lakes you explore. Right? It's not so much of the vehicle. It's about where you go and where it takes you.
Yeah, that's kind of an unfortunate thing with the overland industry. It's become so much about the vehicle. And we go to these shows from time to time, and a lot of them are just spotless, and they've never been out of the showroom. Right. We show up with this dented. Like if you look at ours right now, there's a piece of barbed wire stuck in so tight we can't get it out. You'd have to rip apart, and it's all scratched up. But that's what it's for. It's just to get us out there. And initially, like I think I said earlier, already started talking about it. For us, it was just we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know if we wanted to do that, but we wanted to spend time as a family. And what it allowed us to do is spend multiple nights around a campfire with the kids.
So fun.
Building memories that will last a lifetime. And so it's been, that for us has been really what it's all about. We say we kind of fell into the overlanding thing by accident.
Right.
It was really more just about spending time as a family. So, and it allows you to do that.
Well, too, when you have kids, you got to do something cool, especially when they're young. You know what I mean? Like my kid loves freaking monster trucks. You know what I mean? Like they like that kind of stuff, right? Where the wagon, the camper van is sort of like, mostly like retired folks and small families going to a provincial park. But if you're having teenagers, you got to do something cool. Yeah. And guess what? That's fun for us older guys too.
It is too. Yeah. You're having fun. You're with your family and you're driving some pretty neat vehicles.
No, I feel super blessed. Like I travel a good amount for my expeditions as well, but because in part because of YouTube, because I can do it on YouTube, which for years was the family videos were a losing endeavor but I didn't care because I just wanted to spend a lot of quality time with them. Right.
I love how you guys do that as a family.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
And you get into some crazy, like that's another level, just being in a canoe. I think I keep saying Stikine, but it's Stikine River. Stikine River. Like we drove out to Telegraph Road. That in itself is a journey, but then to hop in a canoe and go all the way to Alaska, I guess. Yeah,
right to the Pacific. Yeah. Well, actually, that's not true. We the weather was just so crazy by the last about 12K because the river really opens up, and we were hitting some like hard downriver current, white caps coming up river, raging headwind. And we just were like, this is too dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like, you know, this is not an expedition. Like, we're out here with our kids. Like,
Yeah.
you don't feel like we need to push on like you failed, like if it was an expedition just with
Right.
me or just the two of us. Of course, so we end up getting a pickup further back from where we wanted to get a pickup. But then the next day was like perfect after all that day of crap. And then next day it was perfect, and we could have just paddled in glass-like conditions. Right, yeah, exactly, right?
But that's for families listening. That's never be afraid to, you know, always don't be afraid to call it and turn around. It's like when we're in the mountains, like we're going to turn around. So we didn't make it to where we were going. Your family safety is more important.
100%.
You know, checking off a
exactly,
box,
and you're already doing something amazing anyways, and it's about the experience that the kids are getting, that you're getting together, and in the end it was super character building. But I guess your kids were a little older when you got out there, but do you notice that they don't seem to be as bothered by certain things like being wet, being cold, bugs and stuff that when they're out in nature as a lot of adults do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
I've noticed that. Yeah, they like, we just hacked through ice last week because we were so desperate to get off. There was a section open and a section frozen, and my son's up there with a big pike pole, and we're just cracking through the ice to get to the mainland. And it's second nature. Like, the comments are like, you guys are crazy and someone's going to get hurt and all this stuff. But I guess your average teenager probably wouldn't do that. But for my kids, it's just like, that's life. Like, let's go. Let's go do it, right? Or they're because we're on an island, we don't have a fully covered boat or anything. There's times you go grocery shopping once a week or once every 2 weeks. You come back and it's a full torrential storm, and you're like, well, we're going to get soaked, you know? You end up just soaked, but I don't hear them complaining at all. It's just... You do become tougher, and that was part of one of our goals. We wanted to be tougher, not so reliant on all the comforts, you know, that make us lazy. And
I think a lot of what comes with being tougher is just being more versed in what you actually need to be worried about and not.
Right.
Because when you get scared, it's probably because you don't have enough knowledge to know that there's nothing to be scared of.
That's absolutely true. It's often your fear is just not enough information about what you're getting into.
Exactly. And so when you're out there and you're used to that kind of stuff, like, I did that. I was breaking through ice in a freaking steel boat with a 9.9 Merc that had one freaking blade left on the prop, and smashing ice to then smash another boat out to get it back to camp. And like, I can't say enough. I mean, up here where I live full time, there's cottagers, and, you know, not to take anything away from them, but their kids kind of just rip back and forth on the ATVs on the road, right? And, you know, you don't have that same experience of really being out there in the weather, of learning about boats, of learning about how to travel, of learning about ice that you do when you're at a water access place. And looking back on it, I would highly recommend, even though it's more of a pain in the ass and it could be, you know, scary and stuff like that, and inconvenient, it's just a way better experience than to just be at a drive up kind of place.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I mean, we put an addition on. We had to barge everything in, but all of those things are what makes this story for us so rewarding. If it was just easy, have it delivered, that's one thing. But, you know, you have to work for everything there. We dig holes for our ice in the winter, bring up buckets. You know, for showering, we had to rig up a water heater system. But, you know,
what did you do for a water heater?
We had a thing called a base camp.
Okay.
And it was propane based.
Instant on demand.
Yeah, on demand.
Nice. Yeah.
But then you bring buckets in, and they've got ice floating on them, you know, and you're going to take a shower. So heat them up a bit to melt the ice, and then take them in there. And the girls would use 2 buckets. The boys get by with a half or one. But you're learning the value of water. When you got to haul the stuff from the lake, you appreciate every drop, right? So you become less wasteful. There's all kinds of things about the adventurous lifestyle that are beneficial to people, I think. And so, don't always choose the easiest route. Take the hard route. Sometimes it's better.
What do people think when you're out there? You're gone for 3 months? What? You're gone for longer? Did anybody think, well, what about your kids? Are they not going to learn as much? And did you deal with, you know, friends and family questioning these things? Yeah,
that and we still do. And that's probably the number one question. But what it turns out is that the kids ended up, first of all, instead of sitting in school like brick and mortar like me, staring out the window all day.
At the clock.
Looking at the clock, or just dying to get out there, right? They had an education and people talk to them. You could do a podcast with the kids, any one of them, and you'll go, wow, these kids had quite the education. They're very articulate, but they had an education of more hands-on. So historic sites, they've been there, they've learned the history, and the difference is maybe with a curriculum, here's what we learn. Okay, on to the next subject. Whereas they go, I'm interested in that. I'm going to deep dive, and now they get books about it and they read for the next 3 weeks, and they know more than most people know because they deep dive on a subject that they're interested in. So it's been an amazing education. And then the other question is, how about their friends? Their friends are as much their friends now as they were when they left. But I say to people, you got to make decisions. You can't go travel full time and also hang out at the mall with your buddies. You choose one or the other, right?
God forbid kids don't get to hang out at the mall.
Yeah,
I'm kidding, but yeah.
What are you going to get from that?
Travel is the best, man.
It
when I
is.
was a kid, my parents were involved there. Well, they owned a map company for a number of years, and we got to travel to a fair amount of places. They did business in the States. So, yeah, I've been to a lot of the different... I was also just loved museums and all this kind of stuff when I was a kid too. So, I used to just soak it in. But we actually got to visit a lot of these museums, visit a lot of these actual places like Gettysburg, and go to the places in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian's and that kind of stuff, or La Brea Tar Pits in California. And I used to just kind of, New York City, even some of the museums, and also just visit some of the actual places, the natural places, learning about plants and animals and all this kind of stuff. When you're actually there, I guess I'm trying to say language kind of only does so much,
right?
You mentioned that you went up to Lanso Meadows, and then so what is it? It's like an online kind of learning thing that your kids have to be part of as well with the
Back
homeschooling
then,
program?
there was 2 options for the curriculum in Ontario, and things may have changed now after a lot of kids were home there for a couple of years. So there may be some newer technologies they're using, but at the time there was 2 options. One was called ILC, Independent Learning Center, and one was VLC, Virtual Learning Centers. And we started with VLC because it was a teacher-led online program. We'd have to get Wi-Fi, and then the teacher would have a class. There might be 20 people in the class, and the kids could listen in and respond typing, and they'd go through the regular curriculum. But then we started doing some crazy time zones, and so a live class, they'd have to get up at 3 in the morning to attend. It didn't work anymore, right? Especially when we went to New Zealand. Now we're a day ahead,
right?
And so we moved to the ILC version, which was basically you get your own books. You study, a parent can look over your shoulder and help you learn the program, but you don't have to be the teacher. And they would email the lessons in, and the teacher would respond, change this.
So can anybody kind of sign up for this?
If it's still there, ilc.org at the time. Anyone, but you have to live in Ontario. But I think a lot more provinces and states have, since COVID, kids were home, have offered more online homeschooling programs. So there's more options now than we had. But it was great. And so the kids would do their schooling. But like I said, the real schooling would start when that computer was closed, and we'd get outside. And so Lanso Meadows, they rebuilt. They found the site where Eric the Red came in from Greenland or whatever, Iceland to Greenland, back in 900 or something, way back when. And he would overwinter right on the North Atlantic there and built these sod or peat. They'd cut peat out of the bog and build these buildings, longhouses. And they found all the remnants of that, so they rebuilt them. And then they have character actors there, so you walk into it and it just feels like you're stepping back into that time. So, and there's actual artifacts. So the kids really got into Viking history, and just that type of learning is superior, I believe. So,
and then did they then have to take a class or log back into the online learning about Lanso Meadows, because that was part of the curriculum? We learned about that in high school.
I remember one in particular. We were in. I was listening in on my son's class a little bit, and they were talking about that thing, and he was all smiling because he's been there. They can't see him, but then the teacher went, "Wait a minute, Pete, you've probably been there." And he's like, yeah, I've been there, kind of shy. And he's like, you teach the course. And so Pete starts telling his experiences there and how the wind felt coming off the North Atlantic. Like, it was cold. It was November, and how it felt to dig, how they had built these, they would collect, believe it or not, iron, what they called bog iron, would collect on the plants growing in the bog. They'd collect all that stuff, and then they were so innovative. They took the clay and they built these bloomery furnaces, and they would actually make metal. They learned the science of this iron going, and it would work its way down in the fire, and then they'd forge nails for their ship repairs, and it was just
Out of
insane.
plants?
It was iron in the water that would collect on little beads on the bottom of the
okay.
reeds.
Okay.
And they've discovered this stuff way
Yeah,
back
because a
when.
lot of water has super high iron content. So they're
Yeah.
just basically finding a whole bunch of rust.
Basically rust,
Yeah.
and they had some chemical reaction in these bloomery furnaces they'd make.
Yeah.
And so he knows the science better than me. He just started, what's a bloomery furnace? He learns all about it. So he's teaching this class, right?
Yeah.
So
I didn't know about that.
no,
Yeah.
that was something we couldn't believe.
Yeah. No, I just imagine that that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg with
really
the
is.
interesting things that you have learned.
Yeah.
For being out there, not just about, overlanding and the skill of it. And I'm sure, mechanics, how to fix stuff, that's a super important skill. I'm sure your kids have learned about that too, but just about interesting things about history, geography, elevation. Hey, it snows. You don't want to be stuck at 10,000 feet at this time of year. We got to get down a bit lower. Could you imagine a better way to learn something as simple as that? As some of your
Just to be
experiences?
in it. Yeah. It's been an incredible learning, both for Carol and I, but for the kids in terms of education, and it's opened their worldview. We've had the good fortune to be able to go to third world countries. In Indonesia, they learned how to plant rice by hand. They operated these oxen-driven plows. So they're riding, and there's an ox in front of them, and they're plowing the rice paddies, and taking coconuts and making all kinds of food from it. They just have had so many experiences in places where they come back. We went to Haiti. I was telling you earlier about this experience. So one of the companies a group of companies bought ours, and one of them is Mr. Electric. They do electrical things, and they had heard about this village in Haiti called Ferrier, which had never had an electrical grid. There's no power going in there. It's about 3,000 people, about 800 families. And the kids they're amazing kids, and they want to learn just like any kid. And at night, they go to these little schools with no walls. And they come home at night to mud huts, and they burn kerosene to study at night. And they found there's a lot of respiratory problems because of all the kerosene.
Yeah, it burns dirty.
Yeah, very dirty. And so this group at Mr. Electric thought if we could put together 800 batteries, little solar lights, these strips of lights, LEDs, and a mini solar panel, and teach the families how to use them, and then bring one to each family, it could help with that problem.
What year was this?
2015 maybe.
Okay.
It was still nowadays there's a lot more new technology, but they built these lights, and then we had the opportunity to come along and help train the families. And so that, was an adventure of a lifetime, really. And we got to live in the village of Ferrier for, I don't remember how many days, but off the grid in a little house, no AC,
So you just got involved in this basically through some contacts you had from, the parent company that ended up buying your company.
Yeah.
And you sort of, I guess, volunteered to go down there and head up this whole program.
We didn't really head it up, but the CEO of the company, her name is Dina, she called us and said, hey, this was one of her projects. And they had brought water. They have Mr. Reuter. So the Mr. Reuter folks are plumbers, and they drilled wells there in Haiti before. So they kind of knew the lay of the land. So she said, guys, I'd love if you come and help out funding it, but also showing up. So we said, yeah, we'll do it. We put some thought to it. I said to the kids, you could, for the same amount, go to Hawaii, be in a comfortable place, and enjoy good food and cold drinks. Or we can go here for the same cost. It's going to be extremely hot. You're going to be living in a mud hut. You're going to be in the village. There's no electricity, no Wi-Fi, none of that stuff. So they're like, no Wi-Fi? Oh, my word. But I think it'll be more rewarding. And so they said, let's do that. So we went down there, taught these families, brought them in, teach them that And they speak Creole, so there's a language barrier. I remember my 15-year-old son trying to sign language. The sun's energy is captured by the solar panel. You follow the wire, it goes to that battery, and then you flick a switch and the light comes on. And to watch the wonder in their eyes of flicking a switch and the light comes on for the first time. And some of these people are 45, 50-year-old people.
Yeah.
I'd never seen that concept.
Wow.
And so we, one by one, we taught all the families, and they couldn't take their lights home until the very end. And then the last day, they brought everyone together, and the villagers sang songs for us. It was just an unbelievable time. We handed out the lights, and off they went. And for the first time in history, the village of Ferrier lit up with these LED lights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. Yeah. But we got back to Miami, actually, and we're sitting in the airport getting ice in a drink for the first time, right, in many, many days, sitting in the air conditioning. And the kids are just dead quiet, and they're just like, So I said, hey, to my daughter, what did this experience mean to you? Mm-hmm. And she said, she thought about it for a while. She's like, I have too much stuff, Dad. And I was like, wow. Mm-hmm. I looked at my wife, I was like, that's pretty good insight for a teen,
Yeah.
I've got stuff in my closet. I've got stuff under my bed. I've got stuff in the basement I haven't even seen in years. These kids had nothing, but they were inviting us into their homes, and they were just so proud to show their family. I got too much stuff. So we thought, you know what, that's already been, we thought we were helping them. Mm-hmm. That whole experience, they were helping us. And then my middle son, I said, how about you, Pete? What'd you think? And he looks up, he goes, this is what he said flat out. I will never complain again.
Yeah.
And I was like,
wow. Yeah.
So Carol and I were just like, man, we didn't expect that. And my youngest son, Dan, he's sitting there, and he's just a funny guy. He's, but he was very serious, and he had this look on his face. And he hadn't made friends with two guys his age, Hans and Woodley, about his same age, that live in Haiti. And he goes, my buddy Hans and Woodley, can they come to Miami? And I was like, I mean, probably, but so they got to stay there. I'm like, well, they live there. He's like, well, they're pretty poor, aren't they? And I said, well, yeah, Haiti's one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. And he's like, well, then you won't mind. I left all my clothes behind for them. I was like, you know what, kid? Yeah. We don't mind. We don't mind. So, for us, we thought we were going to help them. They ended up helping us as a family. And that was really one of the things we thought. We always talk about simplifying life, and we're going to go on this road trip. This was near the beginning. But we're so attached to things, So that kind of helped us get in the mindset to be freed up from our possessions. And we started to get into a mindset where we value experiences and time together more than things and money and possessions, right?
What were some of those possessions to give up? Because, when you really narrow things down to what you need to live the way that you've been living, you do end up with having some pretty cool things. Not nearly as many things, but the things you have are serve a purpose, and you probably, you probably respect them a lot more.
Absolutely. And living more minimal is not doing without, it's just having the stuff that services or helps your life as opposed to having clutter. So
the clutter.
We carried on, right? Yeah. And we had still owned our house at the time, and we were in Joshua Tree National Park hiking, and there was no cell service, but we got to a certain elevation. All of a sudden, ding, 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 and my phone kicked in. And I look at it. My brother had been house sitting for us. He'd check on it once a week, right? He lived just up the road. And he showed up to check on it that morning, and he sent me all these pictures. Our place had been ransacked, burglarized, front door kicked down. And there was a big ice storm, so all the alarms and electricity was off. So they hit that road. Oh, no. It's a rural place. They apparently drove in with a truck and just emptied it. So talking about, we want to be kind of freed up from our possessions. That happened without us even wanting to necessarily. Just we were freed up from our possessions. They took
way
everything.
To see the positive there. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
They stole everything we owned, like all of tools out of the garage, everything from the basement, surfboards, windsurf, like every sport equipment. Everything was overturned. Our furniture, our nice furniture, was still there. It was just flipped over and slashed a little bit. Our bed was flipped over.
Why were they slashing? To look for?
They think maybe you have cash in there or a safe or something. All the art was off the walls, and these guys were professionals because their Robert Batemans and things were gone, and the IKEA stuff was just stacked by the door. They were
Wow. So they had good taste then.
they knew their art.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's like, we call it Catalyst 2. Catalyst 1 was going to Haiti and going, you know what, we could probably live more simple.
Yes.
Then we said, we want to be freed from our possessions, and boom, they're all stolen. No. So we're like, okay, that's number 2. So we carried on our journey, and we still didn't want to sell the house. We thought we were going to go home at some point. And then we were hiking in Yosemite National Park, and our middle child, our oldest son, Pete Jr., was starting to get really skinny. Mm-hmm. And he had grown out like a foot that year. He's 14. He's an active, athletic guy. He was drinking tons of water. We thought, he's just a healthy guy. But we didn't notice how skinny he was going. He wasn't really showing us. He's starting to cave in his chest. Yeah. And we were going to hike 2,500 feet to the top of Yosemite Falls. And he got across the first bridge, and he's like, I can't go any further. We're like, what? What's going on, Pete? This is more serious than we thought. And he's like, I don't know, but I can't do this.
Wow.
Normally he's up there half an hour before us. Mm-hmm. And so we said, let's go to the hospital. So we packed up our camp, and we drove out of the park, Yosemite, and there's a little town called Gold something. And there was a clinic, and we went and waited in the clinic. And then the lady said, you need to take your son to the hospital. And we're like, okay, what's up? She said, I think I know what it is, but there's Children's Hospital in Fresno. It's a 2-hour drive, and it's the best children's hospital in America for type 1 diabetes. And we're like, we don't even know what that is. She said, you will. Mm-hmm. We raced him into the hospital. Didn't have to sit down even in the room. They're just like, bring that young man here. They laid him down. He was about to go into what's called diabetic ketoacidosis. It's a life-threatening problem. Mm-hmm. At some point, he would have gone into a coma and could have died. And so we had no idea. And the doc came in, now you're going to notice in hindsight all the things, but don't worry about it because nobody really knows what to look for. And they got him on insulin drip and slowly brought down his blood sugar. And we spent 3 days him in ICU, and then they trained us on how to give insulin shots and how to manage all that. But laying there or sitting there where your son's laying there in that condition in ICU, and both Carol and I were like, that was our third catalyst. It was like, you know what? We have nothing is of value to us except spending. If only we can spend a bit more time with our boy.
Yeah.
And so between those 3 things, we got him back. He recovered and learned how to manage it. We went back to Toronto. He went to his doc. He got stabilized. We sold the house. We said, let's just do this full time. And then and we flew back, got in our vehicle, went to Alaska. First, before Alaska, we were in Oregon. We climbed South Sister. It's 10,350 feet.
Nice.
And he's with type 1, testing every couple miles.
And so type 1 diabetes is just something that you're born with, essentially.
It's an autoimmune, and they don't know, but it's not like diabetes. Diabetes you can recover from, and it's usually to do with lifestyle. Right. Diabetes is where your pancreas still produces insulin, but you've become resistant to it. Mm-hmm. Type 1, what they used to call juvenile. It's only young people that normally get it, and your pancreas stops producing insulin altogether. Yeah. And actually, a Canadian guy from Alliston, he used to be on the $10 bill. I should know this, but Banting. Sir Banting, he discovered insulin.
Yeah, we actually learned that in high school, I think. Yeah.
We went to his site in Alliston, Ontario, where his old homestead. Pete was all interested. And he's like, oh, that's a pretty neat discovery. And he actually could have made billions on it, but what he did was he said, this should be free to the world. And he gave it to the University of Toronto. Yeah. Along the way, somehow they've messed that up now, and they charge a fortune for it.
Oh, no. Yeah.
He gave it.
Yeah. So at that point, are you just thinking, our son has this, this disease essentially that's going to need treatment? Was it sort of like, do we stop doing this? Or it sounds more like you realize, well, life is short and we don't really care about our house and all these sort of worldly possessions. What we care about is our son, and let's make, the best times we can with him. Was that sort of like a moment where a tipping point?
That was the third catalyst where we said that this is what life is really for us. That's what's most important to us, not having the nice car in the nice neighborhood and all that. We were like, what happened back then in that life was I was gone to work all the time. So guys, I love you. Good breakfast. I'm gone.
Yeah.
They're like, I got to go to school. My wife says, I got to go to the gym. And then we'd get home from work. I'd be late and they're off with their friends. We'd never see each other. So we thought, let's keep this life going. We're enjoying time together.
Yeah.
But really it was up to him. We were saying, Pete, this is a life-changing thing. This is a lifelong disease. If you don't feel comfortable, we're cool with whatever. We'll all change our lifestyle. You have to eat more keto friendly, you know, because every time he takes in carbs, our insulin kicks in, right? But when you have T1D, it doesn't produce any insulin. So then your blood sugar levels go through the roof. So you have to give insulin and it brings it down. So you're managing constantly. Nowadays, we started with 2 years of injections. He'd have to prick his finger, blood comes out, test his blood, give a certain amount of insulin. All for 2 years. And then pumps started coming in and there's a lot better technology now. You still have to manage it. It's still not perfect, but it makes life good. And if the kid has the right attitude, so Pete, right away, he's like, I may have type 1 diabetes, but type 1 diabetes doesn't have me. I'm climbing that mountain. And we're like, are you sure? He's like, I'm doing it. And we went and we climbed it. And that gave him the confidence. He's like, okay, let's go to Alaska. And then we did New Zealand. And then we did Australia and Indonesia, where you can't find insulin. Like in Indonesia, last story. I don't know how much time we have, but we were leaving New Zealand to get our flight. And now we're managing medicine. We never had that before. We got up early to get on a bus. And one of the ladies comes running down. And usually the people that clean the hotels are from Tonga or whatever that other island is, Fiji. And she comes down and she's like, magazine. Wait, magazine. You left magazine in the room. And we're like, we don't have magazines. Like we're like, it's okay.
Right.
And she's like, no, okay. And then the bus leaves. And we get to the airport and we're on the plane. We're flying the 8 hours to Australia. And you know that movie where the mom is, they're leaving on their holiday. It's like Home Alone. And then halfway through the flight, she's like, Kevin. Carol's medicine. She wasn't saying magazine. She was saying medicine. We left all his. Oh no! Actually, this is from Australia to Indonesia. We're going to Indonesia with no insulin. He had only enough for a few days, and we're like, oh my word! She was saying medicine, not magazine. Anyway, so we had to drive all over, hire a car, and drive. They didn't sell it at pharmacies. Finally, found a hospital that had mercy on us and gave us some, or sold us some. But anyway. We learned to travel also with a young guy with challenges, as you guys do.
Yeah.
Which is really that's why we latched on. As soon as we saw your first, we stumbled upon one of your YouTubes and we're like, man, that's brave what you guys are doing, and it's the coolest life for that little young man.
Yeah, well, for Wesley, it's everything has its own unique challenges, but yeah, he's 5 and we don't know if he'll ever be able to walk or talk. He says the odd word, which is awesome, and he is developing more and more, but you can just see him out there looking at the scenery go by when we're in the canoe, loves sitting by the fire, loves the birds. In the morning he just loves, big smile on his face, listening to the birds. I always used to be like, why is this kid so happy like in the mornings? And I realized because he loves the birds. So now if you kind of whistle and you make bird noises, it'll remind him, or you use the bird book where there's pictures of the birds and you press the buttons and it makes the different bird calls. Like, loves it. I don't know what it is. Right.
We see it in his smile. Like,
$1 million.
He may not be able to communicate with language, but that universal language of that smile. Every once in a while you're saying something to him and he breaks out with this huge smile and you're like, he got it. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to know exactly how things are going to go with him, when we when he gets bigger and we need to go take him to the other side of a portage trail if he's not mobile or whatnot. But we just keep trying to think positive. Like they say that the best thing to do is, positive thoughts for the future equal power in the present. So again, it's like what you were talking about is, you're stuck on this mountain road and, what if this happens and then this happens? You start stacking all these negative things, right? Like, stop that and envision something that's positive and that's happy. And that takes away that concern, that anxiety, and makes you, able to so much better deal with whatever challenges are put in front of you at that time, right?
It allows you to think clearly and do the one thing that would save you. Like we're panicking about a grizzly bear, but that made us put the grizzly or all our bear cautions in place by thinking calmly about it, rather than saying, what if it comes in and tears the place apart and we all die?
Yeah, exactly.
You can let your mind run.
Yeah, and that's funny. I wonder if it's from nature, bush time, being on these, adventure trips that now, this is my kind of first time thinking about it, talking to you, that actually really helped me deal with the challenges of having a kid that's gonna be, because you have a kid, like, well, he's gonna make the NHL, obviously, right? And then it changes things a lot. So yeah, I wonder if it's that time I spent doing these things that help me then mentally deal with the challenges that my own son has too, eh?
I'm sure. I'm sure it is, and I just love how you and your wife have been doing that.
Thanks,
my brother has a young fellow with CP, and he takes him everywhere. He can't walk, he can move his hands, so he you see him skiing down the hill, and his feet are just strapped in, and he's strapped here. Or he'll come to the lake. He's the happiest kid, just like Wesley. He's got a huge smile all the time. But getting them in nature, I think, is probably the best place for them to experience life, It
really does. And, the specialists say you get them into nature. It's good for anybody, but it's especially good for Wesley. And, anybody that ends up spending time with a child that has special needs, whatever level it is, they just steal your heart. You know what I mean? They really just do. So, yeah, no, it's a really special thing. And also to just be able to get out there and do these kinds of things with him as well, as we're lucky to be able to do that too, And technology is constantly changing. So I know his name is Weston, so it's very similar. My brother's son, and he now has what he calls his bulldozer, and it's got little tracks, and he can. Cool.
Yeah, he can only move one hand, but he can kind of be mobile with that.
We got to get one of those.
Yeah.
Because I know Wesley, because he has the wheelchair now, but it's not one of the ones he can move the wheels. But he's always trying to reach down and move the wheels.
Yeah.
So I know that he'd have enough motion strength that he'd be able to move himself around a bit. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's all of a sudden the guy's like, we race him with the Jeeps,
Cool.
Yeah, he's like, okay, what's the race the Jeeps? And he's just barely moving, but it's just fun. And awesome. And like I said, technology keeps getting better and better and better. So as your guy grows up, you never know what's around the corner.
I'm sad that I'm not going to get to live to see all the cool stuff that's going to happen in 100 years when they see. I have a pretty, I think a pretty general positive, it might get worse before it gets better, with population and resources and technology, but I have a pretty excited view for how things are going to be in the future,
Yeah. I had the privilege of hearing a futurist, both a negative guy once and a positive guy who just saw the good in every single thing, and how close we are to desalinating water, where we can do all this kind of stuff, just everything he had a positive spin on. And it, just like in getting into trouble on an adventure, there's only two ways of looking at it, positive or negative. You choose, right?
Totally.
But so it does, though. We always tell people, because I'll reiterate for anyone watching, if you're going to do adventures with your family, go out there, have fun, do it, but go prepared. I don't want to be the guy who encouraged someone to go out there and then end up in trouble because they didn't put the proper preparations in place.
Absolutely, yeah. And, if there's anything that you could say, any advice you could give to people that are looking at somebody like you and your family that are inspired by you, very, very small number of people take that step and do what you can do. What would you tell them to be able to, to be able to say, hey, this is what you got to do, or you got to try to use this type of mindset to be able to eventually at least try or get out there and live a full-time life of overlanding, of travel, of off-grid living?
Yeah. If someone asked me to say it in 2 words, I'd say just go.
Yeah.
Because you won't regret it. It'll be far better you think about it too long, and you're going to convince yourself not to. because you'll never be in a financial position where it makes sense. You'll never be in a position where everything you want in life is going to work out. I always said, what are you willing to give up to get what you want? If you do want this kind of a lifestyle, you're going to have to give up the old lifestyle. Are you willing to do that? Then make the jump, right? And find a way to make money while you're on the road. And nowadays, that's getting easier all the time. With Starlink, you can take the internet with you. And like we were as a family in the middle of Quebec, like Kanievsko is a little hydro thing, 800 kilometers from the nearest cell service. So it's known as the most lonely road. I don't know if that's true, but it's lonely. And you can now get on the internet out there with Starlink. So you can find ways to make money out there. That's important, unless you have really, really deep pockets. But that was not us. And just if you do it as a family, they're going to maybe struggle at first because life is it's designed to keep you distracted and busy with, stupid things that keep you inside. And and initially, like games, for instance, the natural world has a hard time competing with something that's giving you a dopamine hit every 30 seconds. It's more quiet out there, so kids can't resist. And when I was a kid, the worst punishment was go to your room, right? Nowadays, the worst punishment is go outside. Right. Seriously?
Crazy. My kid's not at the age where he's, they're not old enough to be involved in social media, although they're freaking celebrities on me and Tori's social media. But yeah, they're not, they might watch their cartoons on a phone, but even that, or on an iPad or on the TV, I had cartoons Saturday morning. Right. Yep. It wasn't anywhere all the time on a phone, right? So that's challenging as a parent to deal with. It is. It wasn't like cartoons Saturday morning. Now they're over. No, the kid, I would never bother asking because I knew it wasn't possible, right? Yeah, there was no such thing. Yeah, and I see, but I definitely see that when we get, Hudson, our toddler, who's 2.5, but he has no interest in watching, Paw Patrol on the phone or iPad. No, he doesn't even care about his toys when we're up in the bush. He just wants to go and explore, which is actually, we got to bring some toys and stuff, because we got to get something to get this kid to sit down for a minute, because he's just off exploring. I noticed that. Oh man, he's just hiking a trail. Yeah, you got to keep an eye on him, or he's such a natural explorer. But it just means if we're trying to take down the tent, one person's got to watch where he's hiking. Turns everything to a one person job, right? Because he's off doing an adventure, and which is so good for him, though. And if you can keep that going through his teen years, that's what we did. The kids didn't even get cell phones till they were much older. And they didn't miss them. We had one phone for all our travels. First of all, it's expensive. Like, we had to go to Vodafone in New Zealand, Australia places, and pay for a card. And so you didn't have streaming or anything. It was expensive. So we shared a phone, and everyone was cool with that. The kids just didn't miss in the olden days where everyone had one phone in the house, and we got, and the numbers were on the, all your friends' numbers were on a list on the fridge, and you memorized the people's numbers too back then. And if a guy had more than 2 zeros, it took too long. You're like, I'm not going to call that guy. But it'd be faster to go walk over and talk to him in person. Yeah. But to this day, my youngest son Dan, there's another cabin on the island which he's been fixing on his channel, and he lives in there. And we have an extra Starlink, and I was like, you could put that down there. He's like, no, I do not want it. I'll come and check my stuff at the main cabin, but I need a free zone away from it, because he sees the temptation. He can sit there and he's like, an hour went by and all I'm doing is scrolling through. Right. No, I feel like that too, especially being in content, and I'm on my phone too. I have a bit of an excuse because it's related to Same with us, the business and that. Yeah. But I also notice that when I post something, I want to go there. You're supposed to always interact, and which I like connecting with people that are commenting and that, but I'm trying to get something else done, and I'm all of a sudden getting distracted, and then you just end up feeling like not good that you've been, looking at comments or looking at how your Instagram post is doing. So, you gotta just put it away to get something done sometimes. You really have to. Yeah. And that's a benefit, I think, of off-grid living and all that, is it helps you as a parent. Because a lot of parents, they say it to us all the time. I couldn't pry my kid away from the games or from the phone. We go up to the cottage and they want to leave because there's no connection. And it's an addiction. So you help them get off that. And when you're on an adventurous lifestyle like we've been living, they don't have time for it. There's nothing you're going to see on Instagram that's better than what you're seeing out your window. Yeah, it's like a husky. Well, people say, well, why don't your huskies run away? It's because they will as soon as I stop doing things that are more fun than whatever they would be doing when they would run away.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to do something awesome with your kids, like they're probably more fun than the phone, maybe that's a good way to get them off of it. But I think also just having a little bit of time and getting used to being bored too is underrated. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's sometimes when you're bored is when interesting thoughts that might actually be your own thoughts come into your mind, as opposed to, you know, being on your phone and hearing 1,000 other people's thoughts, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And part of it, talking about that, we used to hike a lot. We still do, but we did a lot more when the kids were younger. And people would say, you know, you're on these long road trips, 3 kids in the back. How do you keep them from ripping each other's hair out, right? And the same with you as parents. Like, don't you want to break once in a while? And of course, you get in each other's hair after being in tight quarters all the time. That's when hiking came in. It was my wife's idea. Hey, these kids need to burn some energy, right? And so we'd do a massive hike, and that solved all those problems really quick. But then we got onto these really long hikes where you're like going for 6 to 8 hours just to the summit, and then you got to do 6 to 8 hours back. And we introduced audiobooks. So our kids would listen to Shackleton's Endurance Adventure, you know, and they know it off by heart now, just on a hike, and it keeps you kept them occupied. So some of these little tips for parents,
and also to just mix the education and literature and hiking and exercise. The outdoors, man. That's it. You know, that's what I was talking with Mike Rant, who's canoed across Canada multiple times and all this, and he's talking about mental health and how good that makes you feel. And we sort of, you know, came to the conclusion that it's like everyone knows nature makes you feel good, is good for your mental health. And, you know, especially with so many kids with anxiety disorders and stuff nowadays, and doctors are prescribing, writing scripts for like nature time. And you put, well, no, they're actually, they're doing that too, but they're actually writing scripts for nature.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they're saying here, you know, you need to go out and spend X amount of time in nature. Right? It's a thing. Yeah. And, but so it's when you mix exercise, and everyone knows how good exercise is for all the same things and how good that makes you feel, which is something that we all probably, a lot of people want to do more of. It's hard to find the time, but it's great when you can find the time. And so you mix those two things together, right? And then, so you're out in nature, you're getting exercise, and then now you're taking a third step is on top of that, you're mixing in another education that's interesting and good for their minds too. It sounds like no wonder they're doing so well. There's a couple hours really well spent learning a story, but all the leadership lessons that might be in that story. And it's adding 3 elements to one thing that you're doing. So those are things we learned kind of the hard way along the way, and my wife is really good at coming up with those ideas, and they've been game changers. So we get parents asking us, how do you handle, you know, especially kids fighting in the back. We have old videos of our first trips, and the boys were just literally I know, man. I have brothers too.
And they're like, oh, we're just having fun, right? But it would drive you nuts as a parent. So you have to have little tricks and tips. And as soon as we could, we split into two Jeeps. Then they're busy driving, sharing driving.
And then you get to be on the walkie with each
then
other.
You're radioing. And then when you added the element of cameras, now you have someone outside. You're calling. They're like, okay, shot complete. And, you know, then it just became just so much fun.
And the whole filmmaking aspect of it too. That's something that they're learning. That's really a life skill that you can monetize. You can, I know Alexis at Outdoors just started a business where she's branching away from YouTube a bit, and she's just using her filming stuff to help businesses create cool content and reels and videos. And
it really
as a videographer and filmmaker, not to mention that it can give you the freedom of being able to do what we're doing with YouTube and you know, inspiring people, hopefully at the same time too, right?
Yeah, so putting out good content and great stuff for families to sit and watch. But you're right. It's a modern skill. I remember reading something when we were just thinking about this, that the business you need to get in for the future is online content creation and marketing. And I was like, really? When I was a kid, there was no such thing. I didn't even know, like YouTube.
Yeah. Well, it's like people would ask, what do you want to be when I grow up? It's like, well, maybe I didn't know the answer because it didn't exist yet. Right?
Yeah.
Like even when I was in university age, what would I even have gone to school for? Like, I guess I could have done filmmaking or something like that. But
so it's some incredible skills, and the kids, it's a constant learning, and they have learned to monetize it, and they get invited to film these docuseries, and that's brought them to the Faroe Islands or crossing all of Iceland in the backcountry. They got to go on an expedition with this these scientists to icebergs and measure, they've measure core samples on icebergs in Iceland, and they've gone to the farthest north they can go in Norway, Nordkapp and Finland and
Svalbard at all?
Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah.
Well, they didn't go to Svalbard, which is an island, but they were at the farthest north you can drive, which is Nordkapp, the North Cape, and then they've been through. They went with that group and filmed up in Alaska. They filmed all the way to the bottom of Baja and back.
So they've basically taken, just their upbringing, what they've learned, the skills of traveling, the passion for traveling, and they're now basically branching off and doing all these freaking amazing things. That must be so cool as a parent to see that, man. Isn't that awesome?
It is. It really is. And we're thankful because they could have hated what they're doing, and they could have
hated you.
They could have hated us. So they still want to hang with us, which is really cool in their 20s. But I'm happy they're able to monetize it, and they're excited about the future. And
it's not only just the monetization; it's like what an exciting, fulfilling way to get out there and do it and have a career, right? Like
I read a quote way back when it said, "Design a life you don't need a vacation from."
Right.
And at the time, work is so hard; you need a vacation just to get away from it all. But what if you could work and love every minute of it, right? That you don't need a vacation.
Maybe that's why I never want to go on vacation, because I already get.
I know people go, "Do you ever take a vacation and not film?" And we're just like, I mean, we would feel horrible. Like we'd feel like we're just, I don't know. You would record your vacations normally. There are times like we can get a video done and then. We're not filming every minute of a week, right? Yeah. People are watching 30 minutes of a full week. Yeah. We have so much time.
I agree. Well. I think that there is an aspect of the filming and the content creation, even though it can be more stressful to break out the camera and make sure your batteries are charged and all this kind of stuff, especially when you're in the backcountry, unlike a lot of my trips are. But at the end of the day, that's also part of the fun of it is that is in kind of engaging in that skill too. I don't. There's some trips I don't film, but the vast majority of them I am. I couldn't imagine going to a beach on an all-inclusive resort. I probably couldn't do. I don't really have a hankering to do that, and if I did, I couldn't do more than a week. You know what I mean? Yeah.
We did that for executive meetings back when we had the business, where we'd do leadership conference in cool places like Curacao or something, but. When we decided to go, we were like, that's not what we want to do, is go vacation. And we want things that challenge us and make us better people, and maybe scary to us at times, but we'll come out better
It's a
people.
travel lifestyle. It's not a vacation lifestyle kind of thing, right?
It started as a trip. It became a lifestyle.
Right, cool. So is there anywhere else, we mentioned your YouTube channel, but is there anywhere else where people that are listening to this can connect with you, check you out on Instagram?
Instagram, Epic Family Road Trip. YouTube is Epic Family Road Trip. Dan's channel is Dan Van Stralen, and Peter's The Adventure Guys. And mostly those two. Everything we put on Instagram goes to Facebook, and we didn't even have the app, and then Carol logged in. This was a while ago, and she's like, "Oh my word, we have thousands of messages. These are some of our most loyal followers," and she was trying to catch up. And sorry, we now have Facebook, but between those three is mostly where we put out our content. But and then the boys have just started their channels, but they're doing awesome, and they're loving it.
Cool.
And they're using the skills they learned on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched a little bit of one of your videos with you're up on the James Bay Road, and my son Hudson looked at this beautiful drone shot you got and these beautiful nature shots of this little kind of campsite right beside this gorgeous lake in the wilderness. And Hudson looks at it and he goes, "I love it." And he runs up and hugs the TV and kisses it.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just like, I've done something right.
You've done something right.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing everything that you share. And thank you for coming on the podcast, man. It's been a great chat.
Thanks for having me and Carol over.
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
it.
You got it, man.
Now let's go down by the river and make a fire.
Yeah.